And Brendan Quirian with the Adirondack Park Invasive Plant Program joins us now. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
It's good to see you again. We were here just a few weeks ago for Invasive Species Awareness Week, and you at the time told us that of all the threats to the Adirondack Park right about now, the two that worried you the most were the Hemlock Woolly Adelgid and also Hydrilla. Woolly Adelgid, an insect that kills hemlock trees, and Hydrilla, a highly invasive aquatic plant that can get into ponds and lakes.
Right.
So let's start with the Hemlock Woolly Adelgid. Right around the same time we were here in July, the first infestation was discovered in the Adirondack Mountains on Forest Preserve land right near Lake George?
That's correct, right on Prospect Mountains. So unfortunately, those fears that I expressed have come to fruition. This is the first infestation of Hemlock Woolly Adelgid within the interior of the Adirondacks, and it is on the Forest Preserve. We're working with DEC to try and control that infestation right now. But the scarier thing for me is that leap from where we knew it was historically in Troy and Schenectady to Lake George is significant. So I would expect that it's in other areas in between that we just don't know about.
And you had said at the time you had hoped it was still a few years away, maybe even 5 or 10 years away.
Yeah, we thought we had a little bit more time before it would get to the Adirondacks. Unfortunately, that's not the case now. And because of that, we're even farther behind in what we need to be doing to respond to this threat.
Who found it? Was it an ecologist out on a field trip?
It was, yeah. It was someone actually from Harvard University, a forester, that was out looking at some of the hemlock trees along the Prospect Mountain Highway and happened to find it.
The good thing here, it was caught early. This was a small cluster and caught in the early stages?
Yeah, so just a few individuals on branches and only 2 trees that were infested. So very early in the response, or early in the infestation. And the earlier we can find an infestation like that, the better chances we have of controlling it.
And after it was found, DEC came in, you folks came in and did a survey, really checked, hundreds of acres around the area to see if you could find any more?
Yeah, we created essentially a 5-mile concentric ring around the heart of the infestation that we are surveying actively right now. And we haven't found any additional infestations in that area, and now we're going to be following up with actually treating those infested trees.
And that's how you control. If you get it early enough and it's not widespread, it can be controlled through insecticide primarily?
At least in the short term. It's really slowing the spread at this point so that it doesn't completely take over our hemlock forest. The long-term solution, though, is biological control agents, which are being researched at Cornell University right now. They're not ready for widespread release at this point, but our hope is that if we can keep Hemlock Woolly Adelgid at bay in the near term, further down the road we can release these biological control agents and have a longer sustained success.
And that's a beetle, right?
It is.
A little beetle that, will it feed on the larvae?
So it feeds right on the Adelgid on the twig. It'll go right down the branch and feed right on each Adelgid. So it's very selective. It doesn't feed on anything else besides Hemlock Woolly Adelgid.
And will that wipe out the Hemlock Woolly Adelgid, or will it just keep it at bay and combat it, so where you won't eliminate it or eradicate it, you might be able to keep it in check?
Yeah, like any biological control, it's never eradicating the invasive that you're trying to control. It's keeping it at bay, and with Hemlock Woolly Adelgid at bay to the point where hemlock can still survive on the landscape. It's not going to die as a result of Hemlock Woolly Adelgid invasion.
And that's critical because the eastern hemlock makes up a good percentage of the forest in the Adirondack Park.
Yeah, it's 10% of the forest up here. So a tremendous number of trees across the landscape are hemlock, both in urban and suburban settings. Majority of the forest preserve is hemlock. So it could have significant impacts if it's allowed to spread.
Economic, because obviously used for lumber, but also ecologically, the hemlocks provide a lot of the shade for the forest and are critical as far as habitat in the ecosystem.
Yeah, they're considered a keystone species. And what that means is if they were to be lost, nothing else could really replace them and serve the same purpose on the landscape. So if you think about native brook trout, they survive in these very cold mountain streams that are shaded by hemlock. If you lose the hemlock, you lose that shade value that is contributing to that cold water that brook trout need. So we need to protect the hemlocks in order to protect these other species that are so critical in the Adirondacks.
And you mentioned surveys were done to see if it had spread, and there are no other infestations right now that have been found.
Not yet. We need to expand our survey efforts into other areas, especially in that area between Glens Falls, in Troy and into the Adirondacks to see if there's any other spot infestations in between. But based on our survey efforts surrounding the heart of the infestation now, there hasn't been anything else.
It has been in New York. I mean, it's been in other parts of New York for some time now.
It's been here since the 1980s. And in some places, we're seeing significant decline and death of hemlocks. So in areas of the Catskills, that's starting to happen. Luckily, in the Adirondacks, what's been limiting its spread is cold winters. Up until recently, that's been what's kept it at bay. But with our milder winters occurring in the Adirondacks and the increased intermittence of those severe winters that really can knock it back, I think that's the result. We're seeing Hemlock Woolly Adelgid spread farther north than it has been.
And is that climate change a lot of, over the past several years, bringing these insects into New York and closer to the Adirondacks?
Certainly. There's no doubt that Hemlock Woolly Adelgid is one example of a climate migrant, and there are others throughout the state.
So while you do the surveys with DEC, you're also counting on hikers and campers to keep their eyes open, to look for, again, the white fuzz that will be at the base of the branches and the needles, and if they see anything to report it.
Absolutely. To report your findings, there's an app called I Map Invasives, and anyone can download it on their phone, and you can essentially, if you see something, even if you don't know for certain whether it's Hemlock Woolly Adelgid or another invasive species, you can take a picture of it, you can record where it was and some basic information, and then it gets submitted to a statewide database where people like me can see what you found and help verify whether it was Hemlock Woolly Adelgid or anything else.
So no indication that the infestation is spread, but obviously this is disappointing.
Mm-hmm.
You were hoping you had some more time.
Right. Certainly, this has been a summer of ups and downs. For sure, we've had some great successes this summer, but there's always something waiting in the wings to kind of keep you in check, keep you vigilant, and make sure that you're always thinking about the next invader on the way. One
of the wins was the interception of some hydrilla that was about to go into Upper Saranac Lake. Lake Stewart inspectors from Paul Smith's College were there, spotted it on a jet ski, about a foot-long piece of hydrilla. Why was that such a big save?
Yeah, so this is probably one of the best examples of prevention I can think of. So hydrilla is one of the most aggressive aquatic invasive plants on the planet, if not the most aggressive aquatic invasive plants. So it's not known to be in the Adirondacks yet. And
it's all over in other parts of New York,
and
in other lakes
the
and ponds.
Yeah, Cayuga Lake has had it for several years and has spent millions of dollars trying to control it. Places like Florida spend multi-millions every year trying to control it. So it's something very worrisome for our region. What happened was a boater came up from the Potomac River in Delaware and stopped at the Lake George boat inspection station to have their boat inspected. The stewards did a thorough inspection, but this fragment was missed on the boat. The boat then went to Upper Saranac Lake, where we have another layer of protection, another boat inspector, and they found this small fragment. So it just reinforces that we need these multiple layers of protection on the landscape, because human error comes into play. You're never going to have a perfect system in preventing the spread. People do make mistakes. Things can be hidden under bunkers on trailers or hidden under boats. And we need to be ready for those types of situations so that we can still stop these things when they get through.
Is that a concern that there aren't enough lake stewards and inspectors?
Where we're at right now is we've come a long way. We have a lot of the major lakes covered with boat inspection and steward coverage, but what we don't have is kind of a robust system of decontamination stations where if something is found, it's very easy for someone to go and have their boat deconned.
I know watchdog groups are relieved that the hydrilla was found, but at the same time, they're saying this shows the need for more to be done, and they're calling on both the federal government and the state government to do more.
There's certainly increased opportunities for engagement at the federal level. We know that prevention and even beyond that, preemption is the best mechanism to control invasive species or prevent them from spreading. So if we can address them at the source of the problem rather than waiting for them to get to the Adirondacks, that would be ideal. So our federal representatives do have a major role to play.